Hey guys, it's Rachel. I'm really sorry I'm getting this video up so late. I've been really busy. I've got so much university work going on, and just a lot going on really. So I'm finally getting to make my video just now. I want to show you something. Look, little Steve. Hello, say hey, Pash Pash. Oh, say hello. This is Pash Pash. This is my girlfriend's little cat. She's fast asleep. Today we're going to be looking at the issue of eating disorders and mortality. That sounds quite a fatal word, doesn't it, really? And I don't really mean for it to, but I think in a number of ways that it is important that we do discuss eating disorders and the impact, and I know that they're one of the mortality rate for eating disorders, especially anorexia nervosa, is far higher than any other any other mental health problem. There's a number of things that I wanted to focus on today with regards to that, and I don't particularly want to list them in importance because I think that each are equally as important, but the kind of threads of thought that I was having to do with this was firstly the physical implications of an eating disorder and how much at risk that can put a person in terms of severe illness or death. It's really difficult to use these words actually. The other line of thought I had was concerning the comorbidity of eating disorders with other mental health problems and how that can put a person at risk. And then the other thread that I was thinking of was more directly linked to eating disorders and having mental health issues, but even without comorbidity being an eating disorder and another mental health problem, but actually how an eating disorder alone can make a person feel, and how actually one doesn't have to be suffering from another mental illness to necessarily commit suicide within an eating disorder. I think suicide is a topic that's very difficult to talk about. So I'm going to start there. Suicidal ideation is something that I've struggled with in the past. I have tried to take my own life on a couple of occasions. It's still something that I find very difficult to talk about. I lost one of my best friends to suicide a few years ago. It's something that's very difficult for me to talk about because I've been there. And in being there and knowing other people who have been, I've also been in a situation that, say, people such as my parents were, whereby somebody I love and care very deeply for feels suicidal. And I guess that you could call that a taste of my own medicine. That's been important in a number of ways because it really has opened my eyes to just how difficult it is to not only watch somebody struggle with an eating disorder, but to watch somebody struggle with suicidal ideation as well, and the thought of taking their own lives. Suicide isn't something I particularly feel you find information readily about. I don't feel it's something that's easily discussed in therapy, through these videos, or even in the media. I think it's a topic that people don't like to address. I'm struggling to address it because I don't like words like death. I don't like words like suicide, taking your own life. But it is a reality, and it's a very real reality for a lot of people. So, with regards to dealing with an eating disorder alone can make somebody feel incredibly suicidal. Issues concerning your food and weight can become such a huge issue for you that it may seem to people who don't understand eating disorders, but it could be flippant to say, but it isn't. But a lot of people say, I'd rather die than be fat. And some people might think about that and be like, are they crazy? But that is a place that a lot of people with an eating disorder get to. They become increasingly desperate with regards to behaviours. The desperation represented in behaviours magnifies these ideas around suicidal ideation and the thought of suicide or making a suicide attempt. A person can feel incredibly trapped within an eating disorder. They can feel very hopeless. Behaviours with an eating disorder are incredibly rigid. They can feel almost innate for a person, and the idea of either leaving that behind can be terrifying, or actually the realisation that this is how it is and how it could always be. I say now, and I don't say this with ease, but I have said that if I was to get ill again, or let's not say get ill again, where I am with my recovery now, I would rather die than be eating disordered again. And that says a huge amount about the place of recovery and the joy that's found in recovery and the place that's found. When I think back to that time, all I remember is desperation. And this is the difficulty when you're in an eating disorder, is that you do feel that desperation, but you cling to your eating disorder in that desperation. Whereas for me now, whenever I have a bad day, I am even more aware of the fact that I would not resort to coping in that way, because I never want that to be my life again. So you've got those difficulties with a person who's very poorly. The idea of being in hospital, I've heard some people say that I would rather kill myself than go into hospital and have to gain weight. And that says an awful lot about the state of depression a person can be in when they're struggling with an eating disorder. That isn't to say that they necessarily have depression or a depressive disorder, but that fear that an eating disorder ignites within a person, a fear so deep, a fear so great that a person would rather die than have to be taken into hospital to gain weight, is in itself a fascinating phenomena, in the sense that how can something control a person to such an extent that they would rather die than be saved? And that's huge. And if you're watching this video, I think it's perhaps important for you to think about that. And if you can't think about that for yourself, to think about maybe your best friend. If your best friend was saying to you, I would rather die than gain a pound, you've got to look at the severity of that. And in looking at the severity of that, it's very easy to think that that's a very flippant comment, but for a lot of people that is a fact. So with regards to mortality, that fear that an eating disorder can ignite, the desperation that an eating disorder can leave a person with, can leave a person vulnerable to suicide. The other aspect, of course, is an eating disorder running alongside other mental illnesses. There's a vast array of other mental health problems that a person with an eating disorder can suffer with. Some of the most common are issues concerning depressive disorder, mood disorders, bipolar, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. What I will say to you, and this is something that I've been shown, is that as a personal thing, and I've seen other people, quite often a person with an eating disorder is also diagnosed with things such as borderline personality disorder, depressive disorder, mood disorders. What I will say is that unless the eating disorder has been dealt with, I think it's very difficult to diagnose those things. I myself was diagnosed with a variety of things, and as I dealt with my eating disorder, those things shifted. I do believe I struggle with some form of mood disorder. Whether that's bipolar or not is still, kind of out there really. But it isn't uncommon to deal with things like OCD, anxiety disorder, depression, whilst you're in your eating disorder, which can then lead to things like suicidal ideation. A person, though, eating disorder aside, can deal with very difficult mental health problems, post-traumatic stress disorder, separate anxiety disorders, separate mood disorders, so that even when the eating disorder has been dealt with, there's something that remains. That's something that's happened for me. A very good friend, Katie, struggled with bulimia and anorexia, and something I said to her at the time was I wouldn't be too fast to kind of try and diagnose yourself with other things, deal with your eating disorder and see where you're at. And she did that, and there is some sort of mood difficulty there for her, whether that was there before the illness or has been a result of all the issues, the changes in your brain that go on with an eating disorder, I'm not sure. So obviously if you've got somebody who's perhaps dealing with an addiction or something like I've said, bipolar personality disorder, that is a comorbid diagnosis with an eating disorder, I don't know whether to say that the chances of a suicide attempt are increased, because I think an eating disorder alone is enough to make a person suicidal. Perhaps what it does is complicates treatment, in that you need to deal with another group of issues. Say if you've got somebody with a drug addiction and an eating disorder, it's how do you deal with both of those things when you need to let somebody with a drinking problem or a drug problem go through detox? How do you manage that type of thing? And that can be the problem when you're dealing with comorbidity, is how do you deal with both of those issues without neglecting one or the other. So having those things alongside can make it very difficult for treatment in terms of medication as well. The other area that seems important to touch on, is the statistics for the mortality rate being so high. I do believe includes suicide, but I do also know that a big issue is the physical implications of an eating disorder, both for anorexia and bulimia. When I say anorexia and bulimia, I'm not ruling out other disorders. My ideas of what anorexia is and of bulimia are far they expand far greater than the current diagnostic criteria. So I do believe that a normal weight person who has their period regularly can be struggling with anorexia. I do believe that a person with bulimia can be somebody who's throwing up 50 times a day, or somebody who only throws up every week, or occasionally purges. I think it's all on a continuum, it's on a spectrum. I don't like the diagnosis of EDNOS, because I think that if they were willing to expand what anorexia and bulimia is, that it would struggle with that. Of course, there's compulsive overeating disorder, but that bulimia falls into that. Some people with anorexia go through periods where they binge when they've starved or fasted for a period of time. So the anorexia, bulimia, I'm going to use the word eating disorders, are incredibly dangerous, and I think we take for granted just how dangerous they are if we manage to continue for a long period of time. The effects of eating disorders are long-standing. They are incredibly damaging. In a lot of ways, it's a complete travesty what can happen to a person. Heart attacks, incredibly common within eating disorders. People's potassium levels dropping, heart arrhythmias, circulation problems. I could go on and on, but your body is at risk as long as you're within an eating disorder, and the denial is part of the disorder, and that will be telling you that your body's okay, but I'm telling you it isn't. And quickly, I want to make a distinction here that came up in a book that I was reading, and she said that you need to view, it wasn't actually to do with eating disorders, seeing your body as an infant. What does an infant, a newborn, need to feel safe and to be cared for? They need sleep, they need food, they need water, they need nutrients. You need to see your body in that same way. It's as helpless as that newborn baby. I'm going to stop now, guys, because it's run over, and I hope I get this back to you. Okay, thanks, bye, bye.